What starts as the worst day of Maya Chen's life becomes the moment everything changes when she accidentally spills scalding coffee all over tech mogul Alexander Reed's $1,000 suit. But his response isn't anger or demands for dry cleaning costs. Instead, he leaves her a tip that will shock you and makes a request that will turn her world upside down. But was it really just an accident? Or did fate orchestrate this collision between two worlds that should never have met? Before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand as she hurried between tables at the Corner Café, a modest diner tucked between a laundromat and a cell phone repair shop in downtown Seattle. At 28, she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been serving coffee and scrambled eggs for the better part of a decade, her black sneakers squeaking softly against the worn linoleum floor. The morning rush was in full swing, and every table buzzed with the energy of people fueling up before another day in the corporate grind. The cafe wasn't much to look at. Faded blue vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked from years of use. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow that had long since faded to something closer to mustard, decorated with local artwork that changed monthly but never quite elevated the space beyond its humble origins. The coffee machine, a temperamental beast that Maya had learned to coax into cooperation, hissed and gurgled in the background like a mechanical dragon guarding its caffeinated treasure. But what the Corner Café lacked in glamour, it made up for in heart. Maya knew every regular by name and coffee preference. There was Mr. Henderson, who came in every Tuesday and Thursday for black coffee and wheat toast, always leaving exactly 15% tip calculated to the penny. Mrs. Rodriguez brought her twin toddlers every Friday, ordering hot chocolate with extra marshmallows while she caught up on emails. And Sarah, the nurse from the hospital down the street who worked double shifts and always looked like she needed that extra shot of espresso more than anyone had a right to. Maya had started working at the cafe during her junior year of college, just a temporary job to help pay for her graphic design courses at Seattle Community College. The plan had been simple: graduate, build a portfolio, land a job at one of the city's creative agencies, and finally start the life she'd been dreaming of since she first discovered her talent for transforming blank pages into visual stories that made people stop and stare. But life, as Maya had learned the hard way, rarely followed the plans you made for it. Her mother's cancer diagnosis came during her senior year, turning her world upside down in the space of a single phone call. The medical bills piled up faster than snow in a Seattle winter, and Maya made the only choice that felt right at the time. She dropped out of school, picked up extra shifts at the cafe, and put her dreams on hold to help her family survive. That had been 3 years ago. Her mother was in remission now, thank God, but the financial hole they dug was deep, and Maya found herself trapped in a cycle of working to pay off yesterday's emergencies, while new ones kept appearing on the horizon. Her younger brother Danny was starting his freshman year at University of Washington in the fall, and Maya was determined to make sure he wouldn't have to make the same sacrifices she had. The dreams were still there, though. Late at night, after her shifts ended and the cafe closed, Maya would sit at her tiny kitchen table in the studio apartment she shared with her mother, sketching designs on the backs of receipt paper or creating digital art on the secondhand laptop she'd managed to buy with tips saved over 6 months. Her portfolio grew slowly, one piece at a time, but it grew nonetheless. She told herself that someday, when the timing was right, when the bills were caught up, when Danny was settled in college, she would take that leap and chase the life she'd put on hold. The morning started like any other. Maya arrived at 5:30 to help with the opening routine, brewing the first pots of coffee and setting up the pastry display with the muffins and scones that Linda, the owner, baked fresh every morning before dawn. By 7, the cafe was hitting its stride, filled with the familiar symphony of clinking dishes, grinding coffee beans, and overlapping conversations about weekend plans and Monday morning meetings. Maya moved through her routine with muscle memory precision. Table 6 needed a refill on their coffee. The businessman at table 2 was ready for his check. The young couple by the window had been nursing the same 2 lattes for an hour, lost in conversation about their upcoming wedding. Each interaction was brief but genuine, the kind of connections that made the long hours and aching feet feel worthwhile. She was carrying a fresh pot of coffee toward the far corner of the cafe when she first noticed him. He sat alone at table 12, the small two-person spot near the back wall that most customers avoided because it was right next to the kitchen doors. But he didn't seem to mind the location. In fact, he appeared to prefer the relative privacy it offered. Everything about him screamed money, but not in the flashy look-at-me way that some wealthy people demanded attention. His suit was impeccably tailored, a deep charcoal gray that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. The fabric moved with him like it had been designed specifically for his body, which it probably had. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine but showing the subtle signs of quality that came from craftsmanship rather than price tags. But it was more than just his clothes. He carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that only came from knowing you belonged wherever you happened to be standing. His dark hair was perfectly styled without looking like he'd spent any effort on it. And when he glanced up from his phone to survey the cafe, Maya caught a glimpse of eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything in return. He was probably in his mid-30s, Maya guessed, with the kind of face that would have been at home on the cover of a business magazine. Strong jawline, high cheekbones, and an intensity that suggested his mind was always working 3 steps ahead of wherever his body happened to be. But there was something else there too, something that Maya couldn't quite put her finger on. A tightness around his eyes, maybe. Or the way his shoulders seemed to carry invisible weight even in rest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What struck Maya most, though, was how out of place he looked in the Corner Café. This was a man who probably ate breakfast at 5-star hotels or had personal chefs prepare his meals. The kind of person who flew first class and never had to check the price of anything before buying it. So what was he doing in her little diner? Stirring sugar into what was undoubtedly the most ordinary cup of coffee he'd had in years. Maya approached his table with the coffee pot, offering the same friendly smile she gave every customer. "Can I warm that up for you?" He looked up from his phone, and for a moment their eyes met directly. Up close, Maya could see that his eyes were a deep brown, almost black, with flecks of gold that caught the morning light streaming through the windows. But more than that, she could see the exhaustion there. This was a man who hadn't been sleeping well, who carried the weight of decisions that affected more than just himself. "Please," he said, his voice carrying just the hint of an accent that Maya couldn't quite place. British, maybe, or European. Cultured, definitely. The kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. Maya began to pour, careful to leave room for cream if he wanted it. But as she tilted the pot, something went wrong. Maybe it was the way the handle felt slippery in her palm from the steam. Or maybe her attention was divided by trying to figure out what someone like him was doing in a place like this. Whatever the cause, the pot slipped in her grip, tilting too far and sending a stream of hot coffee directly onto his pristine suit jacket. The coffee hit his chest and lap, spreading across the expensive fabric like a dark stain of Maya's worst nightmare come to life. She watched in horror as the liquid soaked into the suit that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months. The pot slipped from her fingers entirely, clattering to the floor and sending the remaining coffee splashing across his Italian leather shoes. "Oh my God!" Maya gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The entire cafe seemed to freeze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the coffee machine seemed to quiet its mechanical grumbling, as if it too was holding its breath to see how this disaster would unfold. Maya expected anger. She expected shouting, demands to speak to the manager, threats of lawsuits. She'd seen enough entitled customers lose their minds over much smaller inconveniences. And this wasn't small. This was catastrophic. This was the kind of mistake that got people fired and potentially sued for damages they could never afford to pay. But Alexander Reed, though Maya didn't know his name yet, didn't explode. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he stood slowly, coffee dripping from his jacket onto the floor, and reached for the napkins on the table. His movements were controlled, deliberate, like a man who was used to dealing with unexpected problems without losing his composure. "It's okay," he said quietly, his voice carrying a calmness that Maya definitely didn't feel. "Accidents happen. Maya was already moving, grabbing every napkin within reach and offering them while she continued her stream of apologies. "No, it's not okay. This is terrible. Your suit, your shoes. Oh God, this is going to cost a fortune to clean, and I don't know if it can even be cleaned. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." Her hands were shaking as she tried to help, but Alexander gently took the napkins from her. "Really? It's fine. No permanent damage done," but Maya could see that wasn't true. The coffee stain was already setting into the fabric, dark and obvious against the light gray material. The shoes were soaked, their perfect shine now dulled by coffee and cafe floor grime. This wasn't fine. This was a disaster that was going to follow her long after he left. "Let me get my manager," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Linda will know what to do. We have insurance, I think. Maybe we can pay for the cleaning, or replacement, or whatever you need." Alexander continued dabbing at his jacket, more out of habit than any real hope of undoing the damage. "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Maya insisted, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "This is my fault. I wasn't paying attention. I was distracted. And I ruined your clothes. And you were probably on your way to something important. And now I've destroyed your whole day." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, all the stress and exhaustion of her life suddenly focused on this one terrible moment. She thought about the conversation she'd have with Linda, about whether this mistake would cost her the job she couldn't afford to lose. She thought about the dry cleaning bill, or worse, the replacement cost, and how many months of tips it would take to even begin to make it right. But Alexander was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Not anger, not frustration, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like understanding. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler than before. "Maya," she managed, still clutching the useless napkins. "Maya, Chen. And I promise, we'll make this right somehow." Alexander nodded slowly, as if he was making some kind of internal calculation. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, careful to avoid the wet areas, and pulled out his wallet. Maya's stomach dropped, thinking he was going to demand immediate payment for damages she definitely couldn't afford. Instead, he pulled out what looked like a business card and a pen, but as Maya watched, he began writing on the back of the card, his handwriting neat and precise, despite the circumstances. When he finished, he folded the card in half and tucked it under his coffee cup. "The suit will be fine," he said, standing to his full height. He was taller than Maya had realized, probably 6'2" or 6'3", with the kind of presence that filled a room even when he wasn't trying. "And Maya?" She looked up at him, still expecting the other shoe to drop, still waiting for the anger or demands she was sure were coming. "Sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them," he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Even when they start with spilled coffee." Before Maya could process what that meant, he was walking toward the door, moving with the same quiet confidence despite his coffee-stained clothes. The entire cafe watched him go, conversations resuming in hushed whispers as soon as the door closed behind him. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the cafe, still holding the napkins, still trying to understand what had just happened. Slowly, she became aware that Linda was standing beside her, having emerged from the kitchen at some point during the chaos. "Well," Linda said, her voice carrying the bemused tone of someone who had seen everything in 30 years of running a diner, but had never seen anything quite like this. "That was interesting." Maya finally moved, bending to pick up the coffee pot and beginning the process of cleaning up the mess. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I don't know what happened. I just lost my grip, and—" "Maya," Linda interrupted gently, "look at the table." Maya glanced over at table 12, where Alexander had been sitting. The coffee cup was still there, along with the folded business card he'd left behind. But there was something else too, something that made Maya's heart stop. Money. A lot of money. More money than Maya had ever seen in one place outside of a bank. She walked over to the table on unsteady legs, Linda following close behind. The bills were crisp and new, arranged in a neat stack held down by the salt shaker. Maya's hands trembled as she lifted the money, counting despite herself. $100,000. The number didn't make sense. Maya counted again, sure she was making a mistake, sure her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the number stayed the same. $100,000 in cash, left on the table of a small cafe like it was the most natural thing in the world. That can't be right, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Linda picked up the folded business card, opening it carefully. Her eyes widened as she read whatever was written there, and she handed it to Maya without a word. On the front of the card, embossed in elegant script, was a name, Alexander Reed, CEO, Reed Technologies. But it was the handwritten message on the back that made Maya's world tilt on its axis. Maya, thank you for reminding me that the best connections happen when we're not trying so hard to make them. The money is yours, no strings attached. But if you're interested in exploring what else might be possible, call me. There's a whole world of opportunities waiting for someone with your authenticity. Alexander. P.S. Coffee stains wash out, genuine moments don't. Maya read the message 3 times before the words began to sink in. This wasn't payment for damages. This wasn't compensation for his ruined suit. This was something else entirely. Something that defied everything Maya thought she knew about how the world worked. Do you know who this is? Linda asked quietly, reading over Maya's shoulder. Maya shook her head, still staring at the card. Should I? Linda pulled out her phone, typing quickly. After a moment, she turned the screen toward Maya. The search results showed dozens of articles and photos featuring the same man who had just sat at table 12. Alexander Reed, tech mogul and billionaire entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Reed Technologies, one of the fastest-growing companies in the Pacific Northwest. Net worth estimated at over $2 billion. He's one of the richest men in Seattle, Linda said, her voice filled with awe. And he just left you a tip that's probably more than I make in 3 years. Maya sank into the chair Alexander had vacated, the money still clutched in her hands. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. This morning she had been Maya Chen, struggling waitress and failed art student, pouring coffee and counting tips to pay next month's rent. Now she was holding enough money to change everything. Enough to pay off her mother's medical bills, to help with Danny's college costs, to maybe, finally, chase the dream she'd put on hold. But why? Why would a billionaire leave this kind of money for a waitress who had just ruined his expensive clothes? And what did his message mean about opportunities and authenticity? The cafe around her had returned to normal, the drama of the coffee spill already becoming yesterday's gossip. But Maya sat in the eye of her own personal hurricane, holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and wondering if her life had just changed forever, or if she was about to wake up from the most vivid dream she'd ever had. The money was real. The card was real. And somewhere in the city, Alexander Reed was probably changing into a fresh suit, already moving on to whatever important business had brought him to the Corner Café in the first place. But he had left behind something more valuable than money. He had left behind a question, a possibility, a door that Maya could choose to walk through or leave forever closed. As she carefully folded the money and slipped it into her apron pocket, along with the business card, Maya realized that for the first time in 3 years, she had a choice to make that wasn't driven by desperation or duty. She had the power to decide what came next. The question was, did she have the courage to use it? Maya stared at the business card for the 100th time that evening. Alexander Reed's handwritten message burned into her memory like a brand. She sat cross-legged on her narrow bed in the studio apartment she shared with her mother, the $100,000 spread across her comforter in neat stacks. The money felt surreal, like props from a movie set that would disappear the moment someone yelled cut. Her mother, Elena, sat in the worn armchair by the window, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied one of the bills under the lamplight. Even after 3 hours of discussion, she still looked like she was seeing a mirage. "Mia, I've counted this money 5 times, Elena said, her voice carrying the soft accent that always became more pronounced when she was emotional. It's still the same number every time. Maya picked up Alexander's card again, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Reed Technologies. She had spent the afternoon researching everything she could find about Alexander Reed online, and what she discovered left her more confused than ever. He wasn't just wealthy, he was revolutionary. His company had developed software that helped small businesses compete with corporate giants, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process. Articles described him as brilliant but reclusive, generous with his charitable giving but intensely private about his personal life. What kind of man leaves a tip like this? Maya wondered aloud. Elena set down the bill she'd been examining and looked at her daughter with eyes that had seen enough of life to recognize a crossroads when one appeared. The kind who sees something worth investing in. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sophia, who had been blowing up her messages since Maya had called her with the news that afternoon. "Have you called him yet?" "Please tell me you've called him." Maya hadn't called. She'd picked up her phone at least 20 times, dialed half the number, then hung up before it could ring. What was she supposed to say? "Thank you for the money? Why did you do this? Are you insane, or am I?" "I don't understand what he wants from me," Maya said, flopping back onto the bed and staring at the ceiling. Men like Alexander Reed don't just hand out life-changing money to random waitresses. There has to be a catch. Elena stood and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her hand finding Maya's forehead the way it had when Maya was little and running a fever. Maybe he wants exactly what he said. Maybe he saw something real in you. Like what? "I spilled coffee on him, Mama." That's not a special talent. "You handled it with grace," Elena said firmly. "You didn't make excuses or blame someone else. You took responsibility and tried to make it right. That's rare these days." Maya sat up, the money crinkling beneath her. But why so much? If he wanted to be nice, he could have left $50 or $100. This is... She gestured at the stacks of bills. "This is change your life money." Elena picked up one of the hundreds, holding it up to the light. "Your father used to say that the universe sometimes sends us exactly what we need. Exactly when we need it. But never in the way we expect it." Maya's throat tightened at the mention of her father. He died when she was 16, leaving behind a family that struggled to stay afloat without his steady income as a construction foreman. Elena had worked 2 jobs to keep them housed and fed, but the medical bills from her own cancer treatment had nearly drowned them all. "What would Papa say about this?" Maya asked quietly. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. "He'd say you'd better call that man before he thinks you're too scared to dream big." Before Maya could lose her nerve, she grabbed her phone and dialed Alexander's number. Her heart hammered against her ribs as it rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe this was all some elaborate joke that would reveal itself when a stranger picked up and told her she'd dialed a pizza place. "Maya." His voice was warm, familiar, as if they'd known each other for years instead of hours. "I was hoping you'd call." The simple statement caught her off guard. She'd prepared herself for awkwardness, for this stilted conversation between 2 people from completely different worlds. Instead, Alexander sounded genuinely pleased to hear from her. "Hi," she managed, then immediately felt foolish for such an inadequate response. "I mean, thank you. For the money. It's incredible, but I don't understand why. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow evening? I'd like to explain in person." Maya's pulse quickened. "I work until 6. "Perfect. There's a place I'd like to show you. Nothing fancy, just somewhere we can talk without interruption. I'll pick you up at 7 if that works for you." Maya found herself agreeing before her rational brain could intervene. They arranged to meet outside the Corner Café, and after she hung up, she stared at her phone in disbelief. "Well," Elena asked, hope bright in her eyes. "I have a date tomorrow night." "With a billionaire." Maya shook her head. "How is this my life?" The next day at work, Maya moved through her shifts in a haze of anticipation and anxiety. Every customer seemed to notice her distraction, and she mixed up orders twice before lunch. Linda finally pulled her aside during the afternoon lull. "Honey, you're a mess today." "What's going on?" Maya glanced around the cafe, making sure they were alone. "I'm seeing him again tonight." "Alexander Reed?" Linda's eyebrows shot up. "The billionaire coffee man?" "Maya, that's wonderful." "Is it? I keep thinking this is some kind of mistake. Like I'm going to show up and he's going to realize I'm just a waitress who dropped out of college and lives with her mother." Linda placed a motherly hand on Maya's shoulder. "Or maybe he's going to realize exactly what I've known for years. That you're smart, talented, and capable of far more than you give yourself credit for." But what if he expects something? What if this money comes with strings I don't want to be tied to? Then you say no and give it back, Linda said simply. But Maya, what if it doesn't? What if this is exactly what it seems like? A chance for something better? At exactly 7 o'clock, Maya stood outside the Corner Café wearing her one good dress, a simple navy blue number she'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. Her stomach churned with nerves as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Alexander emerged from the driver's side, and Maya felt her breath catch. He looked different than he had in his coffee-stained suit. Tonight he wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and when he smiled at her, Maya felt some of her nervousness begin to fade. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice carrying that same warmth she'd heard over the phone. "Thank you." Maya smoothed down her dress self-consciously. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere I think you'll appreciate." Alexander opened the passenger door for her. "Trust me." Maya hesitated for just a moment, then slid into the car. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't identify. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, and Maya was surprised to find herself relaxing into the comfortable seat. "I have to ask," Maya said as Alexander pulled into traffic. "Why me? Out of all the people you could have this conversation with, why the waitress who destroyed your suit?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "Do you know what I was doing at your cafe yesterday morning?" Maya shook her head. "I was having the worst morning of my professional life. I'd just come from a board meeting where I learned that someone I trusted, someone I considered a friend, had been selling company secrets to our biggest competitor. 3 years of work, gone. Hundreds of jobs at risk." His jaw tightened with the memory. "I was sitting in that cafe trying to figure out how to rebuild everything from scratch." "That's terrible," Maya said softly. "It was, but then you spilled coffee on me. And instead of making my day worse, something strange happened. You were so genuinely sorry, so concerned about making it right, that I remembered what it felt like to interact with someone who wasn't calculating every word for maximum advantage." Alexander glanced at her. "When was the last time someone was completely honest with you? No agenda, no hidden motives?" Maya thought about it. "Every day at the cafe, actually. People complain about their eggs being too runny, or ask for extra cream, or tell me about their grandmother's funeral. It's all pretty honest." "Exactly." Alexander's smile was rueful. "I haven't had an honest conversation in months, maybe years. Everyone wants something from me, and they're all willing to lie, cheat, or manipulate to get it. But you just wanted to clean up the coffee and make sure I wasn't angry." They drove through downtown Seattle as the evening light faded into dusk. Maya watched the city lights begin to twinkle outside her window, trying to process Alexander's words. In her world, honesty wasn't a rare commodity. It was just how people got through the day. "Where I come from," Maya said carefully, "honesty isn't special. It's just normal." "That's exactly why it's special," Alexander replied. He turned into a parking garage beneath a gleaming office tower, and Maya felt her nerves return. This was his world, all glass and steel and intimidating success. But instead of taking her inside the building, Alexander led her to an elevator that went up, up, up to what Maya assumed was going to be some impossibly fancy restaurant where she'd embarrass herself by not knowing which fork to use. Instead, the elevator doors opened onto a rooftop garden. Maya stepped out into an oasis of green in the middle of the concrete jungle. Raised beds filled with vegetables and herbs created winding paths between fruit trees and flowering plants. String lights hung overhead, casting a warm glow over everything, and the sound of a small waterfall trickled from somewhere in the darkness. "This is incredible," Maya breathed, walking slowly along one of the paths. "Whose is it?" "Mine," Alexander said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "I bought this building 2 years ago, and this was the first thing I had installed. My office is on the 42nd floor, and I come up here when I need to remember what's real." Maya knelt beside a bed of tomatoes, inhaling the rich scent of earth and growing things. "You farm?" "I grow food," Alexander corrected with a smile. Everything you see here goes to local food banks and shelters. It's not about the money saved or the tax benefits. It's about creating something instead of just acquiring it. They walked through the garden as Alexander explained his vision for urban farming, his voice becoming more animated than Maya had heard it before. He showed her the compost system, the rainwater collection tanks, the carefully planned rotation that kept the soil healthy. This wasn't a hobby or a publicity stunt. This was passion, the same kind of passion Maya felt when she was sketching or designing. "Why did you bring me here?" Maya asked as they settled onto a bench near the waterfall. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights spread out below them. "Because I wanted you to see that the money I left you isn't about charity or guilt or some kind of power play. It's about recognizing potential when I see it." "What potential?" "I'm a college dropout who serves coffee for a living." "You're an artist who put her dreams on hold to take care of her family," Alexander said firmly. "I did my research, Maya. I know about your mother's medical bills, about your brother's college plans, about the portfolio you've been building in your spare time." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "You investigated me?" "I learned about you," Alexander corrected gently. "There's a difference. And what I learned is that you have talent, dedication, and the kind of character that can't be bought or taught." He turned to face her fully. "I also learned that you've been trapped by circumstances that had nothing to do with your choices and everything to do with a system that punishes people for caring about their families." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "That money, it's enough to change everything. To pay off Mama's bills, to help Danny with school, to maybe even go back and finish my degree. It's enough to give you choices," Alexander agreed. "Real choices, not just the illusion of choice between different kinds of survival." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the city muted by distance and the gentle splash of the waterfall. Maya tried to wrap her mind around the possibility that her life could be different, that the dreams she'd carefully packed away might actually be within reach. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. Alexander smiled, and Maya caught a glimpse of something boyish and uncertain beneath his successful exterior. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure yet. But I know I want to find out what happens when someone with your authenticity and my resources work together. Maybe it's a business partnership. Maybe it's just friendship. Maybe it's something else entirely. And if I take the money and disappear? If I decide I don't want anything to do with your world? Then I'll be disappointed, but the money is still yours with no strings attached," Alexander said without hesitation. "I meant what I wrote on that card. There are no conditions, Maya. This isn't a loan or an investment with expected returns. It's a gift, freely given." Maya studied his face in the soft light, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. All she saw was sincerity and something that looked like hope. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Alexander stood and offered her his hand. "But while you're thinking, would you be willing to let me show you a few more things? Not dates necessarily, just possibilities." Maya took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. His skin was warm and calloused, surprising her. She'd expected the soft hands of someone who'd never done manual labor. But Alexander's palms spoke of work in this garden, of building something with his own hands. "What kind of possibilities?" she asked. Alexander's smile was mysterious and full of promise. "The kind that might change both our lives." As they made their way back to the elevator, Maya felt something shifting inside her chest. For 3 years, she'd lived in survival mode, making decisions based on necessity rather than desire. But standing in Alexander's garden, surrounded by growing things and twinkling lights, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt hope. Maya's world tilted on its axis over the next 2 weeks, as Alexander kept his promise to show her possibilities she'd never imagined. It started small, with coffee meetings that stretched into lunch, then dinner invitations that felt more like adventures than dates. He took her to a community art center in South Seattle where local artists taught kids from low-income families how to paint, sculpt, and dream in colors. He showed her the urban farm cooperative he'd helped fund. where former restaurant workers grew organic produce and sold it at farmers markets, creating sustainable income for families who'd lost everything during the pandemic. But it wasn't just the places he showed her that changed Maya's perspective. It was the way Alexander listened when she talked about her own dreams, asking questions that pushed her to think bigger than she'd ever dared. During a walk through Pike Place Market, as they sampled honey from local beekeepers and watched artists create portraits of tourists, Maya found herself describing the community art program she'd always wanted to start. "I used to imagine teaching kids in neighborhoods like mine how to use art to tell their stories," Maya said, pausing in front of a mural that depicted the history of Seattle's immigrant communities. "Not just pretty pictures, but real art that captures what it's like to grow up between two worlds, or to watch your parents work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "What would you need to make that happen?" The question caught Maya off guard. She was used to people nodding politely when she shared her dreams, offering encouraging but ultimately empty responses like, "That sounds nice," or "Maybe someday." Alexander's question demanded specifics, required her to think about her dream as something achievable rather than just wishful thinking. Space, I guess. Art supplies. A way to reach the kids who need it most. Maya felt her excitement building as she spoke. And teachers who understand what it's like to grow up without resources, who can connect with kids who think art is just for rich people. How much space? What kind of supplies? How would you structure the program? For the next hour, as they wandered through the market, Maya found herself sketching out a business plan without realizing that's what she was doing. Alexander's questions were sharp and practical, pushing her to consider details she'd never thought through. How would transportation work for kids whose parents couldn't drive them across town? What about liability insurance? How would they measure success? By the time they sat down for lunch at a small Ethiopian restaurant tucked between a vintage bookstore and a record shop, Maya had outlined a comprehensive program that could serve hundreds of kids across Seattle. The realization hit her like a physical force. "I could actually do this," she said, staring at the notes she'd scribbled on napkins. "This could be real." Alexander smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Of course it could. The question is, do you want it to be real?" That night, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling of her tiny bedroom, her mind racing with possibilities. The $100,000 Alexander had given her was sitting in a new bank account, untouched, while she decided what to do with it. Part of her wanted to use it practically, to pay off her mother's medical bills and help with Danny's college expenses. But another part, a part that had been dormant for years, was whispering about art studios and community programs and dreams that might not be as impossible as she'd always believed. The crisis came on a Thursday afternoon, 2.5 weeks after the coffee incident that had changed everything. Maya was working the lunch shift at the Corner Café when her phone rang with a call from Danny's high school guidance counselor. Her brother had been accepted to University of Washington, but there had been a mix-up with his financial aid package. Instead of the full scholarship they'd been counting on, he'd only received partial aid. The family would need to come up with an additional $15,000 for his first year, money they didn't have. Maya's hands shook as she hung up the phone. $15,000 might as well have been $15 million. Even with the money Alexander had given her, using it for Danny's education would mean giving up her dreams once again, returning to the safe, practical path she'd been walking for years. She called in sick for her evening shift and spent the afternoon walking aimlessly through downtown Seattle, her mind churning with impossible choices. By the time she found herself standing outside the Reed Technologies building, the sun was setting and the evening rush was beginning. She stared up at the gleaming tower, knowing Alexander was somewhere high above, probably in meetings with people who dealt with $15,000 problems as easily as she dealt with coffee orders. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Thinking about you today. Everything okay?" Before she could lose her nerve, Maya typed back, "Can we talk? I'm outside your building." 20 minutes later, Alexander emerged from the elevator in the lobby, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He took one look at Maya's face and guided her to a quiet seating area near the windows. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Maya told him about Danny's scholarship situation, about the impossible choice between her brother's future and her own dreams. As she spoke, she watched Alexander's expression, looking for signs of impatience or judgment. Instead, she saw something that looked like understanding and, underneath that, anger. So the system is forcing you to choose between supporting your family and pursuing your own goals, Alexander said when she finished. Again. It's not the system's fault, Maya said automatically. It's just how things are. Families take care of each other. And who takes care of you, Maya? The question hit her like a slap. Maya opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. When was the last time someone had asked who was looking out for her needs, her dreams, her future? I take care of myself, she said finally. Do you? Or do you just make sure everyone else is taken care of first and hope there's something left over for you? Alexander leaned forward, his eyes intense. Maya, what if I told you there was a third option? What if you didn't have to choose between Danny's education and your dreams? There isn't enough money for both. There is, if you're willing to think bigger. Alexander pulled out his phone and opened a note-taking app. Tell me about your community art program again, but this time, tell me how it could become sustainable. How it could generate its own funding while serving the kids you want to help. Despite her emotional exhaustion, Maya found herself drawn into the conversation. Alexander's questions pushed her to think about her program not just as a charitable effort, but as a social enterprise that could create value while serving its mission. What if they charged sliding-scale fees for families who could afford to pay, subsidizing free spots for those who couldn't? What if they partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeship programs? What if they sold the art created in the program, with proceeds going back into scholarships and supplies? You're talking about starting a business, Maya said, the realization both thrilling and terrifying. I'm talking about starting a movement, Alexander corrected. A sustainable way to provide opportunities for kids who need them most, while creating a career for yourself that aligns with your values and talents. He showed her examples on his phone of similar programs in other cities, social enterprises that had grown from single locations to nationwide networks. The founders weren't billionaires or people with trust funds. They were teachers, social workers, artists who had seen a need and figured out how to meet it while building something lasting. But the startup costs, Maya said, her practical nature reasserting itself. Even with the money you gave me, it wouldn't be enough to launch something like this and help Danny. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. What if there was additional funding available? Not charity, but investment in a viable business with strong social impact potential. Maya's stomach clenched. You mean your money? I mean funding from someone who believes in the program and wants to see it succeed. Alexander, I can't keep taking money from you. People will think. She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. They'll think what? That I'm smart enough to recognize a good investment when I see one? Alexander's voice carried a note of frustration. Maya, I've made my fortune by betting on people and ideas that others overlook. This isn't charity, it's business. Is it? Or are you trying to rescue me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them had addressed directly. Maya saw something shift in Alexander's expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. Maybe I am, he admitted quietly. But not in the way you think. Maya, for the past 5 years, every business decision I've made has been about maximizing profit and shareholder value. I've been successful by every measurable standard, but I've lost sight of why any of it matters. He looked out the window at the city beyond. Meeting you reminded me that business can be about more than just making money. It can be about creating opportunities, solving problems, making the world a little bit better. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. So I'm your midlife crisis project. Alexander turned back to her, his eyes serious. You're the person who reminded me what I wanted to be when I grew up, before I got caught up in what I thought I was supposed to be. He reached across the small table and took her hand. But this offer isn't about what I need, Maya. It's about what you deserve. You deserve to have both. Your brother's education and your own dreams. You deserve a partner who can help make both possible. The word partner sent a jolt through Maya's system. Over the past 2 weeks, their relationship had existed in a strange space between friendship and something more. There had been moments of connection, touches that lingered a beat too long, conversations that felt intimate in ways that had nothing to do with romance. But neither of them had acknowledged what was growing between them. "Is that what this is?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A partnership?" Alexander's thumb traced across her knuckles. "I don't know what this is yet. I just know that I've never met anyone who challenges me to be better the way you do. And I've never wanted to build something with someone the way I want to build something with you." Maya looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. 3 weeks ago, her biggest decision had been whether to buy generic or name-brand coffee for the cafe. Now she was being offered a chance to start a business, pursue her dreams, and explore a relationship with a man who saw possibilities in her that she'd never seen in herself. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," Alexander said, squeezing her hand. "If you weren't scared, it wouldn't be worth doing." Maya took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her chest. For years, she'd made decisions based on fear, choosing safety over possibility, security over growth. But sitting in the lobby of Reed Technologies, with the city lights beginning to twinkle outside and Alexander's hand warm in hers, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt brave. "If we do this," Maya said slowly, "if we really do this, I want to do it right. Real business plan, clear expectations, legal contracts. I won't be anyone's charity case, not even yours." Alexander's smile was brilliant. "I wouldn't have it any other way. And I want to start small. 1 location. Maybe 20 kids to begin with. Prove the concept before we think about expanding." "Smart approach." Maya pulled her hand free and sat back in her chair, her business mind fully engaged now. "I'll need 6 months to develop the curriculum and find the right space. Danny's tuition is due in 8 weeks, so that has to be handled first. And I want to keep working at the cafe part-time, at least initially. I need to maintain some income independence." Alexander nodded, pulling out his phone to take notes. "What about the name? Have you thought about what to call the program?" Maya closed her eyes, thinking about the kids she wanted to serve, the stories they would tell through their art, the dreams that might flourish in the right environment. When she opened her eyes, she was smiling. "Canvas and community," she said. "Because art is just the beginning. What we're really building is connection." Alexander typed the name into his phone, then looked up at her with an expression of such pride and affection that Maya felt her cheeks warm. "Maya Chen, founder and director of Canvas and Community," he said, testing how the words sounded. "I like it." As they left the building together, walking out into the Seattle evening with plans to meet the next day to discuss details, Maya felt like she was stepping into a completely different life. Not just because of the money or the business opportunity, but because of the way Alexander looked at her when she talked about her dreams. Like they weren't just possible, but inevitable. For the first time in years, Maya Chen was betting on herself. And win or lose, she was finally playing a game worth playing. 6 months later, Maya stood in the doorway of what had once been an abandoned auto repair shop in the International District, watching 12-year-old Sofia Ramirez put the finishing touches on a mural that took Maya's breath away. The painting depicted a young girl walking across a bridge made of paintbrushes, with her grandmother's face emerging from the clouds above and the Seattle skyline stretching out below. It was raw, honest, and more powerful than anything Maya had seen in galleries that charged $50 admission. "Miss Maya, is it really going in the community center?" Sophia asked, stepping back to examine her work with the critical eye of an artist twice her age. "It's going wherever you want it to go," Maya replied, her voice thick with emotion. "That's your story to tell, and your decision to make." The transformation of the old repair shop into Canvas and Community had taken every ounce of energy, creativity, and determination Maya possessed. The space now hummed with life, divided into different zones for painting, sculpture, digital design, and what Maya called the story circle, where kids shared the experiences that inspired their art. Afternoon sunlight streamed through skylights that Alexander had insisted on installing, casting a warm glow over canvases covered in dreams, struggles, and hopes rendered in bold strokes of color. Maya moved through the space with the confidence of someone who had found her calling. 23 kids were enrolled in the program now, ranging in age from 8 to 16, each carrying stories that would break your heart and inspire your soul in the same breath. There was Marcus, whose paintings of urban gardens bloomed with the vegetables his family couldn't afford to buy. Lily created intricate collages from discarded materials she found in her apartment complex, turning trash into treasure with an eye for beauty that left Maya speechless. And then there was David, whose sculptures made from recycled electronics told the story of a generation caught between the digital world and the physical one. The program had exceeded every goal Maya had set during those initial planning sessions with Alexander. Not only were they serving more kids than originally planned, but the waiting list stretched 3 pages long. Local news outlets had featured Canvas and Community twice, and Maya had been invited to speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship and community development. The sliding scale payment system was working exactly as designed, with families who could afford full fees subsidizing scholarships for those who couldn't pay anything at all. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers or the media attention. It was in moments like this one, watching Sophia step back from her mural with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found her voice and wasn't afraid to use it. "Maya, you need to see this." Alexander's voice came from behind her, carrying a note of excitement that had become familiar over the past months. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper and more complex than either of them had anticipated, blending business partnership with personal connection in ways that sometimes surprised them both. Maya turned to find Alexander holding his tablet, his eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for major business breakthroughs. "The Cascade Foundation wants to meet with us next week. They're interested in funding expansion to 5 more cities." Maya felt her stomach drop. The Cascade Foundation was one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the Pacific Northwest, with a budget that could transform Canvas and Community from a local program into a national movement. It was the kind of opportunity she would have dreamed about 6 months ago, the kind of validation that proved their work mattered on a scale beyond what they'd imagined. So why did the news make her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff? "That's incredible," Maya said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "How did they hear about us?" "The usual channels, media coverage, word of mouth, probably some recommendations from other organizations we've partnered with." Alexander's smile faded as he studied her expression. "You don't look happy about this." Maya glanced around the studio, taking in the controlled chaos of creativity that surrounded them. Kids worked in small groups, their conversations mixing English and Spanish, and sometimes languages she couldn't identify. The walls were covered with artwork that told the stories of their community, pieces that were beautiful not because they followed traditional rules, but because they came from authentic places of experience and emotion. "Can we talk outside?" Maya asked. They walked to the small courtyard behind the building, where Maya had created an outdoor workspace for sculpture and large-scale projects. The late afternoon air carried the sounds of the neighborhood around them, car horns and conversations and the distant music from the taco truck that parked on the corner every day after 3 o'clock. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked, leaning against the brick wall. Over the months, he'd learned to read Maya's moods, to recognize when her silence meant she was processing something important rather than just being quiet. "Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just..." Maya struggled to find the words. "When we started this, the goal was to serve the kids in this neighborhood, to create something that met their specific needs. Expanding to 5 cities means bureaucracy, standardization, losing the personal touch that makes this work." Alexander nodded slowly. "You're worried about mission drift. I'm worried about becoming something we never intended to be. About losing sight of Sophia and Marcus and Lily while we're busy managing spreadsheets and donor reports." Maya picked up a piece of clay that one of the kids had left on a workbench, rolling it between her fingers. "You've seen what happens to small programs when they get big funding. They start serving the foundation's vision instead of the community's needs." "Not always," Alexander said gently. "And the Cascade Foundation has a good reputation for supporting grassroots organizations without micromanaging them. But what if they don't? What if the price of their support is compromising everything we've built here?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, his gaze focused on something in the distance. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight Maya hadn't heard before. 5 years ago, I would have told you to take the money without question, scale fast, grow big, maximize impact." He looked at her directly. "But you've taught me that bigger isn't always better. That sometimes, the most important work happens on a scale small enough to know everyone's name. Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was what she valued most about their partnership, the way Alexander challenged her thinking while respecting her instincts. He brought business expertise and strategic thinking to her vision, but he never tried to override her judgment about what the program needed. "So what do?" Maya asked. "We take the meeting. We listen to what they're offering. And then we make a decision based on what's best for the kids we're serving, not what looks best on a grant report." Maya nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling the weight of the choice ahead of them. Growth meant opportunity, but it also meant risk. The chance to help more kids, but also the possibility of losing the intimate, family-like atmosphere that made Canvas and community special. "There's something else," Alexander said, his voice becoming more hesitant. "Something I need to tell you about the meeting." Maya looked up, recognizing the tone he used when he was about to share something significant. "My ex-wife will be there. Emily works for the Cascade Foundation now, as their director of youth programs." Maya felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. In all their conversations about business and the future, Alexander had rarely mentioned his ex-wife beyond the basic facts Maya had learned from her internet research. Emily Reed, formerly Emily Patterson, had been married to Alexander for 3 years before their divorce was finalized 2 years ago. The split had been amicable, according to the business press, but Maya had always wondered about the details. "Will that be a problem?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "It shouldn't be. Emily and I are on good terms, and she's genuinely committed to the kind of work you're doing here." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Maya had learned meant he was struggling with something. "But I wanted you to know so it wouldn't catch you off guard." Maya set down the clay and faced him fully. "Alexander, what exactly happened between you two?" He was quiet for so long that Maya began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, carefully chosen. "Emily and I got married for all the wrong reasons. We looked good together on paper, came from similar backgrounds, moved in the same social circles. But we never really knew each other, not the way that matters." He met Maya's eyes. "We were playing roles instead of being ourselves, and eventually the performance became exhausting for both of us." "Do you still have feelings for her?" The question came out before Maya could stop herself, and she immediately wished she could take it back. But Alexander answered without hesitation. "I care about Emily as a person, and I wish her well. But no, I don't have romantic feelings for her." He stepped closer to Maya. "What I feel for you is completely different from anything I experienced with Emily. You've seen me at my worst and challenged me to be better. You've never once tried to change me into someone I'm not." Maya felt her cheeks warm. Over the past months, she and Alexander had grown closer in ways that had nothing to do with business. Late nights working on grant applications had turned into long conversations about their families, their fears, their dreams for the future. Shared meals after community events had become opportunities to talk about books, movies, the small moments that revealed who they really were beneath their professional personas. But they had been careful not to cross the line from partnership into something more intimate. Maya wasn't ready to risk the program or their working relationship on romantic feelings that might not last. And Alexander seemed to understand her caution, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. "Maya," Alexander said, his voice soft but serious, "before we meet with the foundation, before we make any decisions about the future of Canvas and community, I need you to know something." Maya's heart began to race, sensing that whatever Alexander was about to say would change everything between them. "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "Not because you need rescuing, not because I want to fix anything about your life. I'm in love with the way you see possibility where others see problems. I'm in love with your determination to do right by these kids, even when it's difficult. I'm in love with the way you've made me want to be someone worthy of the faith you've placed in me." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. She had known, on some level, that their feelings for each other had moved beyond professional respect and friendship. But hearing Alexander say the words out loud made everything real, in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Alexander," she began, But he held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know where I stand before we walk into that meeting together. Whatever happens with the foundation, whatever decisions we make about the program, I want to face them as partners in every sense of the word." Maya looked at this man who had appeared in her life through the simple accident of spilled coffee, and somehow became essential to everything she was building. 6 months ago, she had been a waitress with abandoned dreams and a bank account that never quite stretched to cover her expenses. Now she was a business owner, a community leader, and a woman who was loved by someone who saw her potential even when she couldn't see it herself. "I love you too," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I've been so scared of admitting it, because everything between us started with your money, and I didn't want people to think I was with you for what you could give me." Alexander stepped closer, close enough that Maya could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "What I can give you is respect, partnership, and support for your dreams. The money was never about buying your affection, Maya. It was about removing the obstacles that were keeping you from becoming who you were meant to be." Before Maya could respond, the back door of the studio opened, and Sophia appeared, her face flushed with excitement. "Miss Maya, come quick! The news people are here, and they want to interview kids about their art." Maya and Alexander exchanged a look, both recognizing that whatever personal conversation they were having would have to wait. The program came first, always. But as they followed Sophia back into the studio, Alexander caught Maya's hand, squeezing it gently. "To be continued?" he asked. Maya squeezed back. "Definitely to be continued." Inside, Maya found herself surrounded by the beautiful chaos that had become her daily life. A local television crew was setting up equipment while kids clustered around, chattering excitedly about being on TV. Parents had started arriving for pickup, and several lingered to watch the interview process. The energy in the room was electric, charged with the kind of pride that came from having something worth celebrating. As Maya watched Sophia explain her mural to a reporter, her voice confident and articulate as she described the bridge between her grandmother's homeland and her own American dreams, Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with media attention or foundation grants. This was why she had started Canvas and Community. Not for the recognition or the growth opportunities, but for moments like this one, when a 12-year-old girl could stand in front of a camera and share her story without shame or hesitation, knowing that her voice mattered and her experiences had value. Whatever decisions lay ahead, whatever challenges came with growth and success, Maya knew she would face them with the same principle that had guided her from the beginning. The kids came first, their stories, their dreams, their right to be seen and heard and valued exactly as they were. And now, she wouldn't be facing those challenges alone. She had a partner who loved her, not despite her principles, but because of them. A partner who had learned to see the world through her eyes and had been transformed by the experience. As the interview wrapped up and the normal rhythm of the studio resumed, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the most ordinary moments. A spilled cup of coffee, a kind response to an honest mistake, a willingness to see possibility where others saw only problems. Maya Chen had learned to bet on herself, and the jackpot was a life beyond anything she had ever dared to dream. The Cascade Foundation's offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Elliott Bay. Maya stood in the marble lobby, smoothing down her navy blazer, the same one she'd bought for job interviews years ago, now paired with confidence she'd never possessed back then. The receptionist had directed them to the 32nd floor, where they'd be meeting with the Foundation's youth development team. "You ready for this?" Alexander asked, adjusting his tie. Even he seemed more formal today. The relaxed warmth Maya had grown accustomed to, replaced by the sharp professionalism of someone preparing for high-stakes negotiations. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied, though her stomach churned with nerves. She'd spent the weekend preparing for this meeting, creating presentation materials that showcased Canvas and Community's impact while staying true to their mission. The folder in her hands contained testimonials from parents, artwork from the kids, and carefully compiled data showing how their program was changing lives in measurable ways. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt both endless and far too short. When the doors opened, they were greeted by a woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that spoke of excellent stylists and unlimited shopping budgets. She was beautiful in the way that magazine covers define beauty. Symmetrical features, perfect teeth, clothes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. "Alexander," she said warmly, stepping forward to give him a brief hug. "It's so good to see you." "Emily, you look well," Alexander replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I'd like you to meet Maya Chen, the founder and director of Canvas and Community." Emily turned to Maya with a smile that seemed genuine, extending a manicured hand. "Maya, I've heard such wonderful things about your program. The work you're doing with underserved youth is exactly the kind of initiative the Cascade Foundation wants to support." Maya shook her hand, trying not to feel intimidated by Emily's effortless elegance. "Thank you. We're excited to share what we've been building with the kids in our community." As Emily led them down a hallway lined with photographs of foundation-funded projects from around the world, Maya couldn't help but notice the way she moved with Alexander. There was a familiarity there, a shared history that showed in small gestures and comfortable silences. They had been married for 3 years, Maya reminded herself. Even if the relationship hadn't worked out, that kind of intimacy didn't disappear overnight. The conference room was impressive in its understated luxury, a long table made of what looked like reclaimed wood, surrounded by ergonomic chairs that probably cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget. Large monitors displayed the Foundation's mission statement and recent impact statistics. Through the windows, Seattle sprawled out below them, the city where Maya had spent her entire life suddenly looking different from this height. 3 other Foundation staff members were already seated at the table, introducing themselves with titles like Senior Program Officer and Director of Strategic Initiatives. Maya shook hands and exchanged pleasantries, but she was acutely aware that she was the only person in the room who hadn't attended an Ivy League university or worked for organizations with billion-dollar budgets. "Before we dive into the formal presentation," Emily said once everyone was settled, "I'd love to hear about Canvas and Community in your own words, Maya. What inspired you to start the program?" Maya took a breath, centering herself in the story that had become the foundation of everything she'd built. "I started Canvas and Community because I grew up in a neighborhood where kids were told that art was a luxury they couldn't afford. I saw talented young people give up on their creative dreams because they didn't have access to supplies, instruction, or anyone who believed their stories were worth telling." She described the old auto repair shop, the transformation into a vibrant creative space, the kids whose artwork now covered the walls of community centers and local businesses throughout the International District. As she spoke, Maya felt her nervousness fade, replaced by the passionate conviction that always surfaced when she talked about her work. "Our model is different from traditional art programs," Maya continued, pulling out examples of student work. "We don't just teach technique. We teach kids that their experiences have value, that their perspectives matter, that art can be a tool for understanding themselves and their place in the world." She passed around Sophia's bridge mural photographs, Marcus's urban garden paintings, Lily's collages made from discarded materials. The Foundation staff examined each piece with attention that felt genuine rather than performative. "The impact has been remarkable," Maya said, moving into the data portion of her presentation. 93% of our participants report increased confidence in their ability to express themselves. 87% have improved their academic performance in other subjects. And perhaps most importantly, 100% say they feel their voice and story matter. Emily leaned forward, studying a photograph of David's electronic sculptures. "Tell me about your approach to sustainability. How do you ensure the program continues to serve its mission as it grows?" This was the question Maya had been dreading, the one that got to the heart of her concerns about expansion. "That's exactly what we're trying to figure out," she said honestly. "Our sliding scale fee structure works well at our current size, with families who can pay full fees subsidizing scholarships for those who can't. But scaling that model to multiple cities would require significant startup funding for each location. Which is where the Foundation comes in," said Robert Chen, the Senior Program Officer. "We're prepared to offer a 3-year, $2.8 million grant that would allow you to establish Canvas and Community programs in Portland, Spokane, Tacoma, Bellingham, and Olympia. Each location would receive enough funding to operate independently while maintaining connection to your original vision." Maya felt the room spin slightly. $2.8 million was more money than she had ever imagined having access to, enough to transform Canvas and Community from a local program into a regional movement. It was validation on a scale she had never dreamed possible. "That's an incredibly generous offer," Alexander said, his voice carefully measured. "What would the Foundation's expectations be in terms of oversight and reporting?" Emily pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. "Standard Foundation requirements. Quarterly financial reports. Annual impact assessments. Site visits from our program officers twice a year. Nothing too onerous, just accountability measures to ensure the grant is being used effectively." Maya flipped through the paperwork, her heart sinking as she read through pages of requirements and restrictions. The Foundation wanted detailed curricula that could be replicated across all locations. They required specific demographic targets for student enrollment. They mandated partnership agreements with established arts organizations in each city. "This says you want us to serve a minimum of 150 students per location within the first year," Maya said, looking up from the documents. "Our current program serves 23 kids, and that feels like the right size for the kind of intensive, personal attention that makes our approach work. Scale is important for impact," Robert explained. "The Foundation Board wants to see programs that can serve significant numbers of young people, not boutique operations that only reach a handful of participants." Maya felt Alexander's hand find hers under the table, a subtle gesture of support that grounded her. "I understand the desire for scale," she said carefully, "but our success comes from knowing every student personally, understanding their individual stories, being able to adapt our approach to meet their specific needs. With 150 kids per location, that becomes impossible." "Perhaps you could hire additional staff," Emily suggested. "Build a team that can maintain that personal touch while serving more students." "It's not just about staffing," Maya replied, feeling her frustration begin to show. "It's about philosophy. Canvas and community works because it feels like a family, because kids know they matter as individuals rather than statistics in a program report. The moment we start optimizing for numbers instead of relationships, we lose what makes us special." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Maya could see the Foundation staff exchanging glances, their enthusiasm cooling in response to her pushback. She was supposed to be grateful for this opportunity, supposed to be excited about the chance to expand her impact. Instead, she was questioning whether their vision aligned with her values. "Maya," Emily said, her voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone, "I understand your concerns about maintaining quality, but sometimes we have to make compromises to achieve greater good. Serving 150 kids adequately is better than serving 25 kids perfectly, if it means 125 additional young people get access to arts education they wouldn't have otherwise." "Is it?" Maya asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Or does it mean we're creating a program that looks good on paper but doesn't actually transform lives the way we know our current model does?" Alexander cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could find a middle ground. What if we started with 3 locations instead of 5, with smaller target enrollment numbers? Test the expansion model before committing to the full scope?" Robert shook his head. "The Foundation's board has already approved funding for the 5-city initiative. Scaling it back would require going through the approval process again, which could take months." Maya felt trapped between impossible choices. Accept the grant and compromise everything that made Canvas and community special, or reject $2, $8 million, and limit their ability to help more kids who desperately needed what they offered. She looked at Alexander, searching his face for guidance, but found only the same conflicted uncertainty she felt. "I need some time to think about this," Maya said finally. "This is a bigger decision than I can make in a single meeting." Emily's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. But I should mention that we have several other organizations interested in similar funding for youth arts programs. The Foundation typically makes these decisions on a first-come, first-served basis with qualified applicants." The implied threat was clear: accept now or lose the opportunity entirely. Maya felt her temper flare at the manipulation, but Alexander's squeeze of her hand reminded her to stay professional. "I understand," Maya said evenly. "When do you need a final answer?" "End of the week would be ideal," Robert said. "That gives us time to process the paperwork if you decide to move forward." As the meeting wrapped up and pleasantries were exchanged, Maya felt like she was moving through thick fog. The Foundation staff were cordial but noticeably cooler than they had been at the beginning. Clearly disappointed by her lack of immediate enthusiasm for their offer, Emily walked them to the elevator, making small talk about mutual acquaintances and upcoming foundation events. But as the elevator doors opened, she touched Alexander's arm. "Could I speak with you privately for just a moment?" she asked. Alexander glanced at Maya, who nodded despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I'll wait downstairs," Maya said, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, Maya caught a glimpse of Emily leading Alexander down the hallway, their heads bent together in conversation. The elevator descended in silence, giving Maya time to process what had just happened and wonder what Emily wanted to discuss that couldn't be said in front of her. 20 minutes later, Alexander emerged from the building looking troubled. They walked to his car in silence, the weight of the meeting settling over them like a heavy blanket. "What did Emily want to talk about?" Maya asked once they were driving through downtown traffic. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "She wanted to make sure I understood the full scope of the opportunity. And she wanted to know if I thought you were the right person to lead a program of this scale." Maya felt like she'd been slapped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you're the most capable, principled leader I've ever worked with, and that any program would be lucky to have you at the helm." Alexander's voice carried an edge of anger. "But Maya, I think there's something else going on here." "What do you mean?" Alexander pulled into a parking spot near Pike Place Market and turned to face her. "Emily and I may be divorced, but I know her well enough to recognize when she's operating from personal motives rather than professional ones. Some of her questions about you, about us, felt more like fishing for information about our relationship than legitimate concerns about program leadership." Maya's stomach churned. "You think she's jealous?" "I think she's confused about why I'm involved with Canvas and community at all. Emily knows me as someone who makes calculated business decisions based on maximum return on investment. The idea that I would fund a program because I believe in its mission, or because I care about its founder, doesn't fit the version of me she knew when we were married." Maya stared out the window at the market's neon signs, processing this information. "Do you think that's affecting the foundation's offer?" "I don't know, maybe. Emily has significant influence over youth program funding decisions." Alexander ran a hand through his hair. "But that's not the most important question right now. The question is, what do you want to do?" Maya closed her eyes, trying to sort through the conflicting emotions swirling in her chest. The practical part of her brain recognized that $2, $8 million, could change thousands of lives, could create opportunities for kids in 5 cities who currently had none. But her heart knew that accepting the grant would mean compromising the intimate, family-like atmosphere that made Canvas and community special. "I keep thinking about Sophia," Maya said finally, "about how she lit up when she finished that mural, how proud she was to explain it to the news crew. That happened because she felt safe, because she knew everyone in the room cared about her specifically, not just as one of 150 kids in a program." "So we find another way," Alexander said simply. Maya opened her eyes and looked at him. "What other way?" "This is the Cascade Foundation, Alexander. They're one of the biggest funders of youth programs in the region. If we turn them down, we're basically saying we're content to stay small forever." "Are we? Content to stay small, I mean?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had spent so much time focused on the immediate choice between growth and integrity that she hadn't considered whether there might be other paths forward. "I want to help more kids," Maya said slowly, "but I want to help them the right way, not just the scalable way." Alexander nodded. "Then let's figure out how to do that. Maybe expansion doesn't have to mean standardization. Maybe we can grow while still maintaining what makes each location special." They spent the next hour walking through Pike Place Market, brainstorming alternative approaches to growth. What if they franchised the Canvas and community model, training local artists and community leaders to adapt the program to their specific neighborhoods? What if they created a network of independently operated programs that shared resources and best practices without being controlled by a central organization? As they talked, Maya felt her excitement begin to return. These ideas felt true to her vision in a way that the Foundation's proposal didn't. They prioritized relationships over metrics, community ownership over institutional control. "We'd need funding for this approach too," Maya pointed out as they shared a cup of coffee from one of the market vendors. "Training programs, resource development, ongoing support for local sites. "We'll find it," Alexander said confidently. "There are other foundations, impact investors, even corporate sponsors who might be interested in a more grassroots approach. The Cascade Foundation isn't the only option, Maya. It's just the biggest." Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the past week, she had felt trapped by the binary choice between accepting or rejecting the foundation's offer. But Alexander was right. There were other ways to grow, other sources of funding, other paths toward the impact they wanted to create. "I want to say no to the grant," Maya said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I want to find a way to expand that doesn't compromise what we've built." Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all day. "Then that's what we'll do." As they drove back toward the International District, Maya felt a familiar sense of anticipation, the same feeling she'd had 6 months ago when she first started imagining Canvas and Community as a real program rather than just a dream. They were about to take another leap into the unknown, betting on their vision against conventional wisdom about how nonprofit organizations should operate. But this time, Maya wasn't jumping alone. She had a partner who believed in her values as much as her potential, who was willing to take risks in service of doing things the right way rather than just the profitable way. "Emily's going to be disappointed," Maya said as they pulled up to the Canvas and Community building. "Emily will understand eventually," Alexander replied. "And if she doesn't, that's not our problem to solve." Maya looked at the building that had become the center of her world, where 23 kids were learning that their stories mattered and their voices deserved to be heard. In a few hours, the afternoon session would begin, and the studio would fill with the sounds of creativity, conversation, and connection. That was worth more than any grant, no matter how many zeros it contained. "Come on," Maya said, getting out of the car. "I want to show the kids the photos from the foundation meeting. They'll get a kick out of seeing their artwork in such a fancy conference room." Alexander followed her toward the building, but paused at the door. "Maya, are you sure about this? Once we turn down the Cascade Foundation, there's no going back." Maya looked at him, then at the building where Sophia's mural was visible through the window, where Marcus was probably already setting up his easel for the afternoon session, where kids came every day knowing they would be seen, heard, and valued exactly as they were. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. And as they walked into Canvas and Community together, Maya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, with integrity, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to the kids who trusted them with their dreams. The Foundation's offer had been tempting, but it hadn't been right. Sometimes the most important decisions weren't about what you could gain, but about what you refused to lose. Maya Chen had learned to bet on herself 6 months ago, when she accepted Alexander's unexpected tip. Now she was betting on something even more important: her values, her vision, and her faith that doing the right thing would ultimately lead to the right outcomes. The gamble felt different this time. Less desperate, more confident. Not the bet of someone with nothing to lose, but the calculated risk of someone who knew exactly what she was fighting for. And this time, she was all in. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.